The most insane trade war has officially begun because Canada, Mexico, and China are pissed and have now all announced their own plans on how to retaliate against Trump's tariffs. So what the hell is going on? Yesterday, Trump's promised 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China officially kicked in. What that means is that any goods sent from these countries to the United States will now cost companies 25% more, or 10% in China's case. For example, if a Canadian business sent a car to the US that cost $50,000, today US companies will pay a $12,500 tariff at the border. So the price of your once $50,000 car is now actually $62,500. Why would Trump purposefully make things more expensive for Americans? Two main reasons.
That's short term, not long term. That's obviously not his long-term goal. But I'm going to break down the tariff thing, a pretty deep dive here.
First is more of a longer-term, unguaranteed benefit, but it would be to change consumer habits to buy more American-made products and incentivize more international companies to manufacture in the U.S. In theory, that means a stronger U.S. economy, more stable jobs, and less dependence on foreign countries.
It is literally called Make America Great Again.
The second reason for imposing these tariffs would be to use them as a tool to pressure Canada, Mexico, and China into doing what Trump wants. Some of these things that he's publicly mentioned include renegotiating trade deals, stopping illegal immigration, and the flow of fentanyl. There's also the far-fetched idea of Canada becoming a state of America. But here's where things get interesting, because instead of just doing what Trump wants, Canada has clapped back with a 25% tariff of their own, and Mexico said they're doing the same but haven't announced the percentage yet.
That's not surprising, and that's crazy. I didn't realize how far north Canada went.
China reacted a little differently by preparing to file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization. So why is Trump not backing down? Just listen to this. In 2023, Canada sent 76% of all of their exports to the United States. That accounts for roughly 19% of their entire GDP. In 2024, Mexico sent 78% of all of their exports to the United States. That makes up 37% of their entire GDP.
A lot of these are American companies setting up shop in the foreign countries to do this. That means no jobs here for those jobs that could have been here. This is globalism. So Trump's tariffs are an attempt to fight against globalism.
But for America, their exports to both countries combined only make up roughly 2.7% of their entire GDP. So simply put, even if they do retaliate, getting into a tariff
that is the definition of a trade deficit
war with the United States would hit Canada and Mexico much harder. Trump knows this, and he's using it.
Excellent. What an excellent breakdown there for that video.
President Donald Trump's second-term trade policy has crystallized into a defining crisis of executive authority, with his administration's sweeping tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, justified under emergency powers, exposing systemic vulnerabilities in the constitutional balance of power.
I put this together. So the AI is great because I put together the articles from the trusted sources that you all know and love, and I said, here's my opinion. The problem with the tariffs aren't even necessarily with the tariffs themselves. The president shouldn't be the one doing the tariffs. That is a legislative act, because what you have now is a situation where it's just like the TikTok bill. Donald Trump, 1 second, literally second by second, like these leftists who change genders. 1 second, Trump could say 25% tariff. The next second, when the clock turns to the next second, he could say, no, I don't. And then when it goes back a second later, he could say 50%. He can change his mind at any moment because of, wait for it, the same problem during the pandemic, emergency powers. If it weren't for these ridiculous emergency powers, which the legislative branch has handed over to the executive branch for some weird reason, that's what they did with TikTok. They didn't need to do that same exact thing. For some reason, they've handed the executive branch that power. Then you look at other powers like the EPA, the FEC, we talked about those that are in the executive branch, but they're considered independent agencies, taking away power from the executive branch. They have messed up our whole system of government. That's part of the reason why we're in this pickle that we're in today.
The March 4, 2025, imposition of 25% tariffs on nearly all imports from Canada and Mexico 10% on Canadian energy products, and a 20% hike on Chinese goods has triggered immediate economic turbulence, erasing stock market gains since Trump's inauguration and amplifying recession risks.
These are short term. Trump would say these are short term risks for long term goals, which I think in theory makes sense. You have to dive real deep into this because he's doing broad tariffs. Every industry is different. There are some things that we don't build here. There's some things we don't grow here that you only get in Canada and you're never going to get in America. Doing a tariff on those seems to be problematic for certain industries, but Trump is painting with a broad brush. That's what we're seeing here, a broad brush.
Consequences are severe, potentially shaving 1% off GDP growth through supply chain disruptions and consumer price spikes. The deeper concern lies in the legal scaffolding enabling these actions. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IA, and Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. These statutes, designed as narrow tools for national security crises, have been weaponized into instruments of arbitrary executive trade policy, bypassing Congress's constitutional mandate to regulate commerce. Trump's tariff regime rests on a January 20th, 2025, national emergency declaration targeting drug trafficking and border security. President Donald
So
Trump.
what you're seeing here is when you do the emergency powers, you need an excuse for the emergency. There's nothing in it that says we have to agree with the emergency. That's not what it is. That's not really emergency powers if you really have to do that. But they could have written that in the law, but they didn't. So Trump is saying that there's a problem with drugs on the border. He's not talking about Mexico. He's talking about Canada. I don't doubt that there might be some problem there, but I'm not buying it that it's a national emergency on the northern border, especially. On the southern border, Trump's pretty much locked it down, hasn't he? That's his words. He hasn't been doing deportations, that's for sure. He's been behind deportations on Joe Biden, but he has been locking down crossing. So I'm not buying the emergency even on the southern border, but he needs a reason to do it. And there's no recourse here other than impeachment, 25th Amendment, or Congress can write new laws. But if the political momentum in the country is with Trump, then you really don't have much of an out here. That's the moment we're in.
Second-term trade policy has crystallized into a defining crisis of executive authority, with his administration's sweeping tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, justified under emergency powers, exposing systemic vulnerabilities in the constitutional balance of power. The March 4, 2025, imposition of 25% tariffs on nearly all imports from Canada and Mexico, 10% on Canadian energy products, and a 20% hike on Chinese goods has triggered immediate economic turbulence, erasing stock market gains since Trump's inauguration.
I don't really care about the stock market gains. That's short term, and that's not how we should be doing policy. But not Jerome Powell, which is a great account on X. This is very interesting. We talked about Libra, we talked about Trump, we talked about Melania. I was going to say my mom. My wife didn't know about this. And we talked about it. I told her, hey, this is what Trump did before. And she knows I'm anti-Trump now, but I've never always been anti-Trump or some TDS guy. But Trump did a rug pull. He did a rug pull with Melania. He did a rug pull with Trump. And he supported the rug pull tangentially with Milei. He hasn't said anything about it. He wants to work with Milei. There was a quote on that. And then this past weekend, he was talking about Bitcoin. And the markets were going up and down. And people are like, are you manipulating the Bitcoin market? I don't know what's going on. So not Jerome Powell says, let's buy the dip and tell dad to roll back the tariffs tomorrow. And not Jerome Powell. Actually, I think, is this the account that's been friend of the show? Actually, maybe not. But they haven't really been anti-Trump. But this is a powerful statement saying that there's corruption here, potentially, allegedly.
And amplifying recession risks. While the tariffs' economic consequences are severe, potentially shaving 1% off GDP growth through supply chain disruptions and consumer price spikes, the deeper concern lies in the legal scaffolding enabling these actions. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, and Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. These statutes, designed as narrow tools for national security crises, have been weaponized into instruments of arbitrary executive trade policy, bypassing Congress's constitutional mandate to regulate commerce.
Yeah, that's straight up in the Constitution. That's like power of the purse in a way. And this is, I was going to say Castro. He looks like the son of Fidel Castro, or Fidel Castro himself in a way.
Now, to my fellow Canadians, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together.
So we've got potentially World War III going on in the eastern part of Europe, beyond Europe, to basically it's almost a fight to decide what is the eastern part of Europe in a way, between Russia and the sunflower country. We've got the Middle East, which is just pure chaos. I think that's why they're trying to save money. They're trying to save money to pump it over to the Tiny Hat, the Dreidel Nation, the Ben Shapiro people. And we also have, on our north and our south, allies that we're finding out aren't really allies. This is warfare right here. This is economic warfare right here. That's what Justin Trudeau is talking about.
That's what we...
And Canada has tariffs on our products. So you could argue, okay, make a deal. We won't, if you really want free trade, I don't. I'm not for free trade. But if that's what he thinks, and Trump is somewhat for free trade, but he's really more nationalist than him for sure. If you really want free trade, then you drop your tariffs, and then I could say, yeah, Trump, if that's what you want, Trump drops his. That's not my position, just to be clear. But if he's going to be consistent, this soy thing right here, if Justin Trudeau is going to be consistent, you drop the tariffs, Trump will drop his tariffs as well. Why would Canada need tariffs, but the U.S. wouldn't? The math doesn't add up. That's what that video was that we started with. Somebody posted about that here. Tony Saruga said, look at some of the historic tariffs Canada hits America with. Milk, 270%, cheese, 245%, butter, almost 300%, HVAC, vacuums, cable boxes, TVs, steel, aluminum, copper. And then he says, take a guess how much financial aid the U.S. sends Canada every year and how much military defense money do we provide? This whole story is going to need to be told. And the problem, again, is not necessarily the tariffs. I don't care. Libertarians are bad on the topic of tariffs. The problem is the legislative power.
I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses.
That kind of doesn't make sense because your GDP is going to suffer, and that's the only way you generate wealth other than printing money. So how are you going to give out more government? He's saying he's going to give out more government. That's not my problem. That's Canada. But the big issue is the reason why the stock market is dropping is businesses don't like this. It was a surprise. We knew from when Trump took over, Trump talked about it when he ran, but they're moving fast. With Elon Musk, Trump is moving probably, I'm going to say 50 times faster than any other president. At first I said 10 times faster. I think Trump has, what that means is in one day, Trump is doing 50 times the work to me than like a Joe Biden. It's that much. These tariffs here take a lot of time to put together, even as an executive order. They're using AI, I believe. Elon Musk is involved, I believe, and they're moving fast. And the market wasn't prepared for this. The market wouldn't have boomed when Trump took over if they would have known about this. It will recover, in my opinion, but short term, it's going to be like, wait a second. Businesses right now are having meetings because there are a lot of them made products here, shipped it over to Canada to get it cheaper or whatever, came back over. They weren't tariffed a lot, and now they can't do that and have the same profit margin. So companies are straggling right now. They're trying to figure out what's going on.
We will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs. We will take measures to prevent predatory behavior that threatens Canadian companies because of the impacts of this trade war, leaving them open to takeovers. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy.
Why is the trade war happening? The trade war is happening because Canada's basically a corrupted leftist type. The Canada is basically the whole state of Canada is like California. You saw what they did to the truckers during the pandemic. That's the country. It's a huge country, but that's basically how the whole country's ran. And Mexico is the same way. They're not allies, obviously. Is California your ally? They're not my ally. If California had their way, they'd be fine locking me up just for my opinions. So that's the problem we have. We don't really have these allies. The tiny hats aren't an ally. They're not an ally. So it makes me look at Russia and China differently.
We will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day because this country is worth fighting for.
He is king of the corny sound bites.
Now, to my fellow Canadians.
If a Disney movie made a fake president, it's basically what he would be.
Trump's tariff regime rests on a January 20th, 2025, national emergency declaration targeting drug trafficking and border security, expanded on February 3rd, to assert that Canada and Mexico had failed to curb illicit fentanyl flows. This framing, however, collapses under scrutiny. U.S. Customs data reveals negligible fentanyl interdictions at the northern border, with over 90% seized at ports of entry from Mexico.
That's his excuse for using the emergency order. It's not adding up to me.
Canadian PM Justin Trudeau had already committed $2.1 billion in December 2024 for border surveillance drones, sniffer dogs, and anti-money laundering units, undermining Trump's claims of inaction. The administration's reliance on IEEPA, a law intended for acute threats like wartime embargoes or terrorist financing, to unilaterally rewrite trade policy reveals a pattern of constitutional arbitrage. By declaring a nebulous, perpetual emergency, Trump has effectively nullified Congress's Article 1 authority over tariffs, transforming a temporary executive power into a permanent policy lever. This maneuver mirrors Trump's 2018-2020 trade wars, but with critical escalations. First, the 2025 tariffs target $1.2 trillion in annual imports, over 40% of total U.S. goods trade, compared to the $380 billion impacted during his first term. Second, the legal rationale has shifted from discrete national security concerns, e.g., steel imports, to a blanket assertion of emergency authority over entire economies. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's claim that tariffs boost investment and national security is undercut by the Council on Foreign Relations' Brad Setzer, who notes that
I don't agree with that part.
similar 2018 tariffs reduced business investment by 1.5.
Yeah, I don't know about that part. What I'm saying is, I don't know. I'm not going to even get into that's part of the research I was doing here. I'm not buying it though. This part that definitely that you don't spend more on national security with. That's not even the discussion I want to have.
Percent annually and pushed manufacturing into contraction. The administration's historical citations, 19th century protectionism, and post-World War II industrial policy ignore modern globalization's integrated supply chains. As Allianz's Mohamed El-Erian warns, the predictable unpredictability of emergency-powered tariffs disrupts long-term capital allocation, incentivizing hoarding and speculative trade maneuvers over productive investment. The roots of this crisis trace to Congress's decades-long cession of trade authority. The 1934 Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act began delegating tariff-setting powers to the executive, but IEPA's 1977 passage marked a watershed. As Noah Feldman notes, the law allows presidents to self-declare emergencies without temporal or substantive limits, creating a self-licking ice cream cone of executive power. Trump's predecessors used IEPA sparingly, e.g., post-9/11 asset freezes, but his administration has stretched it to justify tariffs as a counter-drug measure, despite U.S. fentanyl primarily originating from Mexican cartels using Chinese precursors. This legal elasticity signals that any policy goal can be retrofitted into an emergency, provided the White House labels it sufficiently urgent. Congress's feeble response underscores institutional decay. The 2025 tariffs face bipartisan criticism, but legislative checks remain theoretical. The National Emergencies Act, NA, lets Congress terminate emergencies via a joint resolution, but such measures require veto-proof majorities.
Yep, you don't have the power. So it's not realistic. So I guess when you're in this situation, this is what you get. You're going to get a lot of turmoil and all that. And I don't want to hear anything from a Democrat. All you had to do was stop talking about Transformers, and maybe you would have had somebody. You might have had a different possibility for a different candidate, a real candidate.
Impossible threshold given GOP solidarity. Meanwhile, Senate bills like Tim Kaine and Chris
One of the big things, and this is just breaking news, and I'm not surprised at all, this is part of my discussion, and I'll just end it here with this, is that it is Donald Trump's MO to do the drastic and then bring it down to a negotiation. He just did that with the Panama Canal. He just did that with Zelensky. Today, Zelly basically got on his knees on Twitter and said, "Daddy, can I come back home?" He got kicked out. He was that bratty teenager, and he sent a letter and said, "Daddy, I'm sorry." Literally, he didn't say that, but he basically said, "I'm sorry, Daddy, can I come back home and stay with you?" And Trump's going to do it. Trump always wanted to protect that sunflower country. He never wanted to crash out on him. And that's his MO. That's what he did with North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Little rocket man. It looked like they were about to go to blows. And all of a sudden, he's crossing the demilitarized zone in North Korea. Here's what it looks like for the tariffs.
He's going to come out today angry that Americans are still being killed. Now, both the Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening because he's very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way. And we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow. So somewhere in the middle will likely be the outcome. The president moving with the Canadians and Mexicans, but not all the way.
Sounds like they're going to come out soon. Who knows if it's tomorrow or not, with the deal, because it's in the best interest. You saw the numbers starting this segment, and in the middle of this segment, the numbers are in favor of Canada and Mexico having to change course. Because as bad as you think it's going to be here, it's much, much worse there. And that's why Justin Trudeau said, this is going to be bad. Obviously the takeaway is we've got the powers, the legislative powers and the executive powers all screwed up in DC. But the other part is I wasn't joking, and I still stand by it when I said Daddy's home.
The next clip is ready below. Welcome to After Show Carnage.
Middle MAGA.